What's up, guys? Glad you could join us today. We're continuing in our GOAT series, and tonight we will be talking about the greatest comeback of all time. And we all know everyone loves a comeback story, so I'm gonna actually dive in and tell you one right now. As a rising surf star, Bethany Hamilton's career was cut incredibly short. While surfing one day at the age of 13, a 14-foot tiger shark bit her arm off. Her dream career, gone. All her talent was left to waste. It was all over, or so everyone else thought. As a surfer, both arms are incredibly important for balance and stability while on the board. Both arms play crucial roles in holding your surfboard and swimming out to catch a wave. But just 1 month after the attack, Bethany returned to the ocean, having to relearn how to swim, learning a whole new way to balance, and acquiring a brand new surfing technique. Bethany returned to surfing. At the age of 17, she realized her dream and became a professional surfer, and she would go on to participate in the greatest competitions around the world. Not only did she compete, she went on to win 6 surfing world championships. She also has her own movie called Soul Surfer and a documentary called Unstoppable.
So we all love a good comeback story, right? Like we get behind the underdog, the one who comes back to take the W. We love the person who comes in and just rises above the obstacles of the challenges in front of them and comes back to win the battle. I mean, it's the reason that Avengers Endgame brought in $853 million. Like if you watched Infinity Wars, you knew the Avengers were coming back, and yet we still paid $853 million to go watch them in a theater come back. Like we are all about, it's woven into our DNA. Like we love the comeback story. So it brings up the discussion, who's the greatest comeback story of all time? Who is the GOAT when it comes to comeback stories? So which one is the greatest comeback story? Which one is the best comeback story in our generation or of all time? If we're talking about the GOAT of the comeback story, I mean, was it Michael Jordan when he took some time from the NBA and left and we all thought he was gone and then he came back to win 3 more championships? Was it Rocky Balboa and all the movies where he was beat down to the ground and then emerged victorious right before the credits roll at the end? Was it Steve Jobs, who was fired from Apple as an employee, went out and started his own company that made so much money he actually bought Apple and became the CEO of the company that fired him? What a great comeback story, but none as good as this one.
The greatest comeback of all time. After Jesus took time with his disciples, they went to an olive grove where Judas met them with some soldiers and religious leaders. John 18 verse 12 says, "So the soldiers, their commanding officers, the temple guards, they all arrested Jesus and tied him up. After they tied him up, they took him to Annas, a relative of the high priest, who started asking Jesus questions. When Jesus didn't answer the way they wanted, one of the guards hit Jesus in the face. Then they took Jesus to Caiaphas, the high priest, and several other high-ranking religious leaders. By this time, a large crowd had started to gather. They began accusing Jesus of many things, but they couldn't agree on their story. The thing they did agree upon was that Jesus was challenging their belief system, and for this, they demanded his death. They decided to drag him into the legal courts, so they took him to Pilate, the Roman governor. But Pilate realized quickly this was not a legal matter, so he said in John 18:31, "Then take him away and judge him by your own law." But the Jewish leaders knew that by their own law, they had no right to execute Jesus, so they pushed harder. And so Pilate began to ask questions. This is apart from John 18:33-40. Then Pilate went back into his headquarters and called for Jesus to be brought to him. "Are you the king of the Jews?" he asked him. Jesus replied, "Is this your own question, or did others tell you this about me?" Pilate says, "Am I a Jew? Your own people and their leading priests brought you to me for trial. Why is this? What have you done?" Jesus answered, "My kingdom is not an earthly kingdom. If it were, my followers would fight to keep me from being handed over to the Jewish leaders. But my kingdom is not of this world." Pilate said, "So you're a king?" Jesus responded to him, "You say that I am a king. Actually, I was born and came into the world to testify to the truth. All who love the truth recognize that what I say is true." "Well, what is truth?" Pilate asked. Then he went out again to the people and told them, "This man is not guilty of any crime. But you have a custom of asking me to release one prisoner every year at Passover. Would you like me to release this king of the Jews?" But they shouted back, "No, not this man. We want Barabbas." Barabbas? The one who murdered people? The people were so angry with Jesus that they cheered to have a violent murderer released to them instead of Jesus. So Pilate took Jesus and had him beaten. But this was not just any beating. It was with a weapon that every time it hit Jesus' back, it took skin and muscle away with it. Each time they hit him, getting deeper and deeper into his back. As a sign of utter humiliation, they made a crown of thorns and forced it down onto Jesus' head. And they threw a purple robe on him and mocked him, saying, "Here's the King of the Jews." After his beating, Pilate took Jesus back to the people with the purple robe and the crown of thorns on his head. John 19:4 says, "I'm going to bring him out to you now, but understand clearly that I find him not guilty." But as soon as they set their eyes on Jesus again, they shouted all the louder, "Crucify him!" But Pilate, still realizing this was an innocent man, says in John 19, verse 6, "Take him yourselves and crucify him. I find him not guilty." But the Jews were unrelenting. They would not give up. They wanted this man dead. Pilate started to become fearful of a riot, so he tried to reason with Jesus. He tries to get him to back down from calling himself the king. As Pilate brought Jesus out to the people once more, the crowd amped up even more. Pilate realized there was no other way, so he handed Jesus over to the soldiers to be crucified. They took Jesus and tied him to the cross and made him carry the cross all the way to the place of his execution. When they got to this spot, the soldiers took Jesus' clothes and claimed them as their own. After they had put Jesus on the cross and fixed him to it, they offered him a bitter drink from a sponge they held up to his mouth. John 19:30. When Jesus had tasted it, he said, "It is finished." And then he bowed his head and gave up his spirit. After Jesus was dead, just to make sure, one of the soldiers took their spear and shoved it into Jesus' side, causing a spill of blood and water. Later that day, a man named Joseph asked to take Jesus' body to bury it. He took Jesus down, embalmed Jesus' body with herbs and oils, and wrapped it in a customary burial cloth. They laid Jesus in a cave made to be a burial plot and rolled a giant stone in front of the entrance so that no one could enter. The Jews were afraid, so they asked for soldiers to be placed at the tomb for 3 days. And here he laid. His friends mourned, and the Jews felt proud that they had killed Jesus. And for 3 days, he laid here motionless and dead. But on the morning of the third day, Mary Magdalene and a second woman named Mary went to the tomb to pay their respects. As they were still a little ways off, they saw something. Matthew 28, verses 2-4 say, "Suddenly there was a great earthquake, for an angel of the Lord came down from heaven, rolled aside the stone, and sat on it. His face shone like lightning, and his clothes were as white as snow. The guards shook with fear when they saw him, and they fell into a dead faint." The women noticed that the stone that had sealed the cave was moved, and then they saw the angel. Immediately the angel gave them the best news ever. Matthew 28, verses 5-7. "Don't be afraid," he said. "I know you are looking for Jesus who is crucified, but he isn't here. He is risen from the dead, just as he said would happen. Come, see where his body was laying. And now go quickly tell his disciples that he has risen from the dead."
Jesus was a great guy. Like, even people that aren't followers of Christ would say that Jesus was a great guy. The lessons that he taught were so good just for humanity in general. If someone was in need, Jesus would say, fill the need, go and help them. When someone needs something done to them, do it cheerfully, do it with kindness in your heart. Kindness wins all the time. Jesus would say, forgiveness doesn't just free someone else, but it frees you of the burden that you're carrying. You know, Jesus was one of those guys that taught such incredible life lessons, and even as some people do, he gave his life for his cause. But we don't follow Jesus because he was a great teacher. We don't just follow Jesus because he gave his life to his cause. We follow Jesus for so many reasons greater than that, because he gave his life to save mine. And in the greatest comeback story of all time, Jesus' life didn't end with death, but he came back and he defeated death and he overcame the grave. One of the greatest parts of Jesus' comeback story wasn't just that he came back to life from being dead, but that he predicted it. He told people for the 3 years in his ministry, look, I've got to go away. I'm going to be gone. I can't be with you forever, but don't worry, I'll be back. And then he came back. Like, what an incredible part to the comeback story of all time, to predict, hey, this is what's going to happen, and then to make it happen. And then he did it, proving to everyone that it really was the Son of the Almighty God. But Jesus' comeback story didn't just end when Jesus came back to life. For 2,000 years, Jesus has been rewriting the comeback story and adding to the comeback story, because people who have put their faith in him because of his death and comeback are now coming back from addictions, coming back from death, coming back from sin, coming back from hurt, coming back from hang-ups, coming back from heartbreak, coming back from fear, coming back from anxiety, coming back from all the things that have tried to hold us down on the earth. And Jesus says, no, 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 I came back so that you can come back. And his comeback story writes our comeback story. Jesus came back to life to give you and I life. Jesus' comeback story was so that we, you and I, could have life eternal, life overcoming, and a life of power through our faith in him. So the only question left to ask is, now that Jesus has died for you and come back to life for you, are you willing to live for him?